The ink was barely dry on the paper when Callum Harte pushed back from the table and stared at what he had just done. The lawyer, a thin man named Prescott who smelled of pipe smoke and old paper, folded the deed transfer with practiced efficiency and tucked it into his leather satchel without a word. Outside the window of the Dunmore land office, the Wyoming wind rattled the glass in its frame, as though the land itself had felt the scratch of the pen and was answering with a shudder. Callum was 34 years old, broad-shouldered, and wore the kind of face that had been carved by weather and silence rather than by any particular sorrow. His hat sat on the corner of the desk. His hands rested flat on the table, palms down, as though he needed to press against something solid to keep himself in place. He had been planning this moment for nearly a year. He had rehearsed it 100 times, walking the fence lines of the Harte ranch alone in the evenings, telling himself it was the right thing, the only thing, the sensible thing. His father, Edmund Harte, had built that ranch from nothing, from a single wagon, a tent, and 37 head of cattle he had driven up from Colorado in the spring of 1862. He had named every pasture, dug every well with his own hands, buried 3 horses and 1 beloved dog in the east corner of the property where the cottonwood tree stood. Edmund Harte had also died on that land, in the winter of 1881, leaving Callum not just the ranch but the weight of it, the debt on the eastern pasture loan, the unpaid feed bill at Morrison's Supply, and a cattle market that had fallen through the floor like a rotted board. 2 years of trying. 2 years of drought and falling beef prices and a cattle blight that had taken 40 head in a single season. 2 years of waking before dawn and going to bed after dark and still watching the numbers go the wrong direction in the ledger book. The Dunmore Cattle and Land Company had made a fair offer, not generous, but fair, and Callum had decided that a man who keeps a sinking ship out of loyalty to the ship is not brave. He is simply foolish. So he had signed. Prescott snapped his satchel shut and stood. The transfer is effective as of the 1st of next month, Mr. Harte. That gives you 30 days to vacate the property and remove your personal belongings. The company will send a representative around on the 28th to do a final walkthrough. I know, Callum said. You're doing the smart thing, Prescott added. I know that too, Callum said, and picked up his hat. He rode back to the ranch through the long afternoon. The road from Dunmore to the Harte property cut across 11 miles of rolling sagebrush country, dipped into a dry creek bed, climbed a short ridge, and then opened up into a wide valley where the ranch sat like something that had always been there, like a natural feature of the landscape rather than something built by human hands. Callum tied his horse, Decker, at the post outside the barn. He stood in the yard for a moment, looking at the house, looking at the barn, looking at the long sweep of the south pasture where the grass was coming back after 2 years of thin seasons. There was a part of him, a stubborn, aching part, that said the land was turning. That if he held on just one more season, things might come right. But he had been saying that to himself for 24 months, and a man cannot eat hope for supper forever. He went inside and made himself coffee and sat at the kitchen table where the lamp burned low and yellow in the early evening. He had a month. 30 days. Then he would ride west to Nevada. That was the plan. Clean, simple, final. He did not expect anything to interrupt it. Bell subscribe. Enjoying this story? Hit subscribe for more original Old West tales. Part 2, The Wagon on the Ridge. 3 days after signing the papers, Callum was mending the fence along the north boundary when he heard the crack. It was a sharp, clean sound, the kind a wagon will make when the iron rim gives way. He straightened up and looked toward the ridge road. There was a wagon on the ridge. It had listed hard to the right, its front wheel folded at an ugly angle, and the 2 horses pulling it were stamping and blowing with agitation. From the driver's seat, a figure climbed down with careful, deliberate movements, not panicked, not flustered, simply practical. Callum pulled his gloves off and walked toward the ridge road. As he got closer, he could see that the driver was a woman. Perhaps 28 or 29, dressed in practical trail clothes, a brown canvas duster, denim trousers, and riding boots that had seen real use. Her hair was dark and pulled back under a wide-brimmed hat. She had already crouched down beside the broken wheel and was examining the damage with the expression of someone calculating the cost of a problem rather than mourning it. She looked up when she heard his boots on the gravel. Wheels done, she said. Rim cracked and 2 spokes are split through. I can see that, Callum said. You have a spare? It's not my wagon. No, she said, but it's your fence line, and you were standing next to it, so I assumed you had a property nearby. I'm not asking for charity. I'll pay for the use of any tools and a replacement wheel if you have one. Callum studied her for a moment. She was not nervous. She was not performing confidence either. She was simply level. Calm in the way a good horse is calm. I have a spare wheel in the barn, he said. Might fit. Come on. She tied the horses to the fence post, competently, with a good knot, and fell into step beside him. Where are you headed? He asked. Powder Creek, she said. I'm taking up a property there. There's no town called Powder Creek. Not a town, she said. A property. 160 acres filed under the Homestead Act, 2 years ago, by my late husband. I'm going to work it. A silence. He started walking again. Alone? For now, she said, as though the matter were not particularly remarkable. Her name was Nora Voss. She told him this while he was fitting the spare wheel to her wagon axle in the barn. The wagon bed was loaded with the right kind of cargo: seeds packed in oilcloth, a good plow blade, a coil of wire, hand tools, a medical kit, flour and salt and dried beans, and a long rifle tied to the outside of the wagon board. Everything chosen with deliberation. You know what you're doing, he said. I grew up on a working farm in Indiana, she said. My father didn't distinguish between what his sons could do and what his daughters could do. If there was work, you did it. Callum tightened the last bolt and stood up. Wheel should hold. But Powder Creek is another 6 miles east on Bad Road. Take it slow. She reached into her duster pocket and produced a coin purse. What do I owe you? Keep it, he said. I don't accept charity, Mr. Harte. Callum Harte. And I'm not offering charity. I'm offering a neighbor's courtesy. Take it. A long moment passed. Then she put the coin purse away. Thank you, Mr. Harte. And for the first time, she smiled with brief, real, like a lamp turned on and off in a window. Gone almost before he'd seen it. But seen. Bell subscribe, don't miss what happens next. One click, completely free. Part 3, The Trouble at Powder Creek. She left that afternoon. Callum watched the wagon disappear over the ridge with an odd, unsettled feeling he couldn't name. He went back to his fence mending. He finished before dark. He ate supper, read 3 pages of an almanac, and went to bed. He lay on his back looking at the ceiling beams, and for the first time in months he did not think about the deed transfer or Nevada. He thought about a woman with direct dark eyes who paid for what she used and did not accept what she hadn't earned. He was still thinking about this 2 mornings later when Jim Crowder rode into his yard. Jim worked for Wade Alcott, the largest rancher in Dunmore County. Alcott was not a bad man the way outlaws are bad men. But he was the kind of man who had been powerful long enough that he had confused his preferences with the natural order of things. Jim Crowder was large, laconic, with a face like a closed fist. Mr. Alcott sends his regards, Jim said, from the saddle. He did not dismount. He heard you're selling off to the Dunmore Company. News travels, Callum said. He was splitting wood and did not stop. He also heard a woman has taken up the Powder Creek claim. Mr. Alcott has an interest in that land. He's been running cattle across it for 3 years. He's hoping the new owner might be persuaded to sell or allow continued grazing access. Then Mr. Alcott can ride out and make that offer himself, Callum said. Mr. Alcott is very appreciative of cooperative neighbors, Jim said, and let the weight of that sentence sit in the air. Callum split a log. Tell Mr. Alcott I'm occupied with leaving the county. Jim sat there a moment longer, then turned and rode out without another word. Callum stood with his axe and thought about what Jim had not said. What lay underneath the polite words like a stone under shallow water? Wade Alcott did not ask for things. He made arrangements. That evening, Callum rode out to Powder Creek. He told himself he was just riding. Told himself it was a fine evening and Decker needed the exercise. He told himself these things and did not quite believe them. Nora Voss had been there for 2 days. In 2 days, she had constructed a lean-to against the claim shack, stacked her supplies inside with evident organization, and was currently stretching wire along the eastern boundary with a fence stretcher she operated with unhurried efficiency. She heard his horse and looked up. No alarm. Only a brief assessment. "Mr. Harte," she said. "Mrs. Voss." He dismounted. "You've been busy." "No point in not being." She crimped the wire and straightened up. "Were you riding by, or did you come with purpose?" "I had a visitor this morning," he said. "A man named Jim Crowder. He works for Wade Alcott." Something shifted in her expression. "I know that name. Alcott's men came by yesterday afternoon. 3 of them. The one in front said it would be a shame if a woman alone out here had trouble with her fences or her livestock. He said the country could be unkind to people who didn't have friends." "He meant it as a threat," Callum said. "I understood it as a threat. I told him I had dealt with unkind country before and that he should pass my answer to Mr. Alcott." "Which was no." Callum was quiet. The evening light fell across the Powder Creek grassland in long gold sheets, and somewhere in the cottonwoods a meadowlark was singing as though nothing was complicated. "Alcott doesn't give up easily," Callum said. "I didn't expect him to. But giving up isn't in my nature either." She looked at him. "I appreciate the warning, Mr. Harte. But I want you to understand, I'm not asking for a rescue. I just need to know what I'm dealing with. You're dealing with a man who has money, hired help, and the belief that he can outlast anyone who stands in his way." She nodded slowly. "Then I'll need to be patient and very careful and not make mistakes." A pause. "Would you like coffee? I have a fire going inside." Bell subscribe, more frontier stories are waiting. Hit that button. On the morning of the 12th day after Nora's arrival, 3 things happened. First, the wire she had stretched along the eastern boundary was cut in 2 places, and Alcott's cattle had been driven through the gap overnight. Second, the roof of her lean-to had been partially collapsed, the horses terrified and found wandering in the lower pasture at first light. Third, a note on her door, unsigned, "The spring belongs to those who were here first. Sell the claim before you can't." Callum found out because Nora rode to his property at sunrise. Not in panic. Not in tears. With that same level, purposeful expression. She needed to borrow a horse to retrieve her animals, and she couldn't manage both the horse and the broken wire alone. He went with her. They retrieved the horses. He repaired the wire with her while the sun came up and turned everything orange and sharp-edged. They worked in silence mostly, with the efficient, coordinated movements of people who don't need to talk to communicate. When the fence was done, they stood back and looked at it. "This will happen again," Callum said. "I know. He's not going to stop until he gets what he wants or gets stopped. I know that too. Do you have money for a lawyer?" She shook her head. "My capital is in those seeds and that plow blade. If I don't get a crop in this spring and something to sell by fall, I lose the year. If I lose the year, I lose the claim." Callum turned and looked at the shack, the lean-to, the good grassland, the cottonwoods. The spring glittered in the early light, clean and steady. "Mrs. Voss," he said, "I have a proposition." She turned and looked at him. "Waiting. The Dunmore Company's offer gives me $400 after the debt. The deed transfer isn't final until the 1st of next month. I have 23 days to reverse it if I choose to." She watched him without interrupting. "The Harte Ranch's problem was never the land. My eastern pasture loan is the anchor that sank me. But if I renegotiate the loan and restructure it, the ranch could operate. It always could. The land is good, the water is there. I just ran out of breathing room before the market turned." And what does this have to do with my situation? Your problem is that you have good land, a legal claim, and zero backup if Alcott keeps making trouble. My property and your property together make a different kind of situation. Combined, it's a working operation. Combined, it has two people instead of one, which makes Alcott's harassment more visible and more difficult. She was quiet. A meadowlark called from the grass. The morning was full of clear, cool light. You're proposing a partnership, she said. A working partnership. Yes. A legal one. Shared operation, shared labor, shared decisions, shared profit and loss. I want this in writing, she said. Equal shares of net profit after operating costs. Equal say in decisions. If either of us wishes to dissolve the arrangement, 60 days notice and a fair accounting. Agreed, he said, without hesitation. And I want it clear between us, this is a business arrangement. I want no misunderstanding about what this is. I understand exactly what it is, he said. A business arrangement. She nodded. Once. Then let's go see that lawyer and done more, she said, before either of us changes our mind. Wade Alcott rode to the Harte ranch the following morning. Alone, no hired hands, which Callum noted, because men like Alcott brought muscle when they came to intimidate and came alone only when they wanted to appear reasonable. They sat on the porch, 3 people, 3 chairs, with the big Wyoming sky above them. I'll come to the point, Alcott said. I've been using the Powder Creek Spring for summer grazing for 3 years. I'm prepared to pay a fair rate for continued access. $500 a year. Callum looked at Nora. Nora looked at Alcott. That's a reasonable number for grazing access, she said. But we'll need a different arrangement. We're putting 60 head on that eastern pasture by July. We can't have your herd competing with ours. But the spring itself, the water, we can sell water access. Your cattle can water there, but graze on their own range. Water access only is worth less than full grazing, Alcott said. $300 a year, Callum said. Take it or don't. Alcott drank his coffee. He looked at Nora Voss, who was looking back at him with the complete absence of nervousness that had apparently characterized her entire dealings with him, and which he was beginning to find more unsettling than any amount of visible fear would have been. $350, Alcott said. $300, Nora said. A silence. Then Alcott made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sigh. All right. $300. He stood, put his hat on, and looked at both of them. You're going to have a hard first year, he said, not unkindly. The market's still soft. Most worthwhile things start hard, Nora said. Alcott nodded slowly. He walked to his horse, mounted, and rode off across the ridge without looking back. Nora let out a breath she had apparently been holding for most of the conversation. Callum looked at her with something he could not entirely identify. Admiration was part of it, and relief, and the particular warmth that comes from standing shoulder to shoulder with someone in a moment that required courage, and finding that they did not flinch. Part 6, Honest Words. The first snow came in early November. Callum was coming back through the Powder Creek yard when he saw the light in the claim shack window and knocked. Nora answered, looking tired in a way she didn't usually let show. She had a letter in her hand. She stepped back and let him in. Bad news? He asked. My husband's sister. The Kansas estate is finally settled. A pause. There was less than I thought. It doesn't change anything about the operation here. But it changes something, he said. She looked at the letter. Peter was a good man. Careful and honest. He had a plan for this land that I believe would have worked. I came here because it was his plan, and because there was nothing left for me in Kansas. She folded the letter. Sometimes I wonder what he would make of the way things have actually developed. Callum sat down across from her. The stove was going. The little shack was warm. I think, he said carefully, that a man who chose good land and married a woman with your particular capacities, I think that man would have approved of a practical arrangement that made his plan viable. She was quiet. That's a kind thing to say. It's an honest thing to say, he corrected gently. She looked at him then, really looked, the way she looked at a fence when deciding where to place the next post. Callum. It was the first time she had used his given name. I want to say something to you, and I want you to let me finish it before you respond. All right, he said. When I said this was a business arrangement, I meant it. I still mean it in terms of the agreement. But I want to be honest with you, because honesty produces better outcomes than the alternative. The honest thing is, this is not only a business arrangement. Not for me. Not for several months. She held his gaze. I don't know what to do with that information. I'm not asking you to do anything with it. I simply felt you had a right to know. The snow was falling outside. The stove made a low, contented sound. Callum looked at the woman across the folding table. Nora, he said. It hasn't been only a business arrangement for me either. I wasn't going to say anything because you had set the terms and I respected that. I didn't need to set the terms, she said. I still need them to be what they are for now. But I wanted you to know. That's all. I'm glad you told me, he said. I'm glad we're both honest people. Outside the snow kept falling. And the two people in the warm small shack sat in a silence that was not empty at all. Bell subscribe, last reminder. If this story touched you, subscribe so you never miss the next one. Spring came late, but it came, sudden and emphatic, the way spring always does in Wyoming. They bought 4 new cattle at the Dunmore Spring Sale. Nora's kitchen garden went in on a warm Saturday in early May, both of them working side by side in the turned earth. In May, when they sat down to do the books, there was a genuine surplus. Small. Nothing extravagant. But a surplus, a number on the right side of the ledger that did not immediately disappear under the weight of the next obligation. Callum sat looking at the number for a long time. Then he looked up at Nora. It's working, he said. The words came out slightly unsteady, the way something does when you've been bracing against it so long that the absence of pressure is disorienting. It's working, she confirmed. Simply. Steadily. He reached across the table and put his hand over hers. She looked down at his hand, then up at his face, and what she saw there made her turn her hand over and hold his. And that was how it began. Not with a declaration or a dramatic gesture. With a hand turned over on a kitchen table in the light of a spring morning, next to the ledger book that had finally told them something good, and a house that had almost been sold and wasn't, and a life that had almost gone a different direction and didn't. Epilogue, The Last Brand. They married in September of 1885, in the yard of the Harte Ranch House, in a ceremony so small and practical that the only attendees were Prescott the lawyer and a neighboring family who brought a pie and considerable goodwill. The Nora Voss ranch grew in the years that followed. Not explosively, but steadily, on the basis of good decisions made consistently over time. By 1888 they had 60 head. By 1890 a proper barn at Powder Creek and a young hand named Abernathy who knew cattle and didn't talk more than necessary. The brand, Edmund Harte's original H-bar, was eventually replaced. In the spring of 1887, Callum and Nora sat at the kitchen table and designed a new one, an H and AV interlocked, with a line through them both. Registered at the county office. Burned into iron by the blacksmith at Dunmore. Pressed to the flank of every animal on the combined range. The last brand. The first brand of everything that came after. There is a particular kind of courage that does not announce itself. It does not ride into town with a gun on its hip and a declaration on its lips. It is the kind of courage that reverses a signed deed transfer because it has finally thought clearly enough to see what is actually there. The kind that gets off a broken wagon and assesses the damage without panic. The kind that says the honest thing across a folding table in a winter shack, and turns a hand over on a spring kitchen table, and plants seeds in turned earth beside someone who has chosen to stay. The West is full of stories about men who conquered it. This is a story about two people who simply refuse to be conquered by it. It is a quieter kind of story than most. But the quieter kind tends to be the one that lasts. Moral: when we are in the worst of our difficulties, we see only the one door that is closing and miss the ones that remain open. Courage is not the absence of failure, it is the willingness to look clearly at what has failed, ask for honest help, and build something new from what remains. The land does not care about your pride. It responds only to your persistence, your honesty, and the quality of what you plant in it. Plant accordingly.